Hi there, welcome back to the Ginescast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm your host, Gina Annunziato. Well, we're back here. I'm still going, and I hope I can continue going. I've been reading all your comments. I've been receiving a lot of great feedback from you guys, and I really appreciate it. I'm still looking for somewhat of a format here, and I hope soon I can get some collabs on board. There's a lot of things coming down the pike, and I appreciate you sticking with me while I try to figure it all out. So without further ado, let's start podcast number 3, the debate on decency. When I began ranting on YouTube, I started by using issues that I thought were big or random things that people would find for me, and I would use them as kind of a jumping off point to make my bigger point. Things would be used as a catalyst in order to kind of get my creative juices flowing, so to speak. So for this podcast, something stood out to me that I felt was beginning this debate on decency, so to speak. There was a recent story where conservative commentator Tomi Lahren was just dining out, I believe, in Los Angeles, and someone saw her and just simply threw water on her as she was walking out. Now, like I've said, I am the first person to tell you that I don't particularly like Tomi Lahren. I think as a conservative voice, she's kind of hollow and one of those who just repeats talking points that are fed to her in a way. I don't like her, but I respect her as a person. If I see her in person, I'm not going to just throw water on her because she exists and has views that are different than me. This set off a firestorm debate online about whether or not it was a good thing for her to get water thrown on her. And I'm here to tell you that no, I don't think we should be throwing water on people, essentially assaulting them for simply existing in your space. There is no defense for that. It's just an incredibly rude act. This event is, I guess, sort of similar to what happened to Richard Spencer last year, where he was being interviewed and suddenly punched in the face, where it set off just a whirlwind of debates on whether or not we should, quote-unquote, punch Nazis. It's interesting to me that the people who tell you don't normalize Nazis are the first ones to invoke that kind of extremist wordplay here. And while I absolutely don't agree with basically anything that Richard Spencer has said or believes, I will never ever believe that people should be assaulted for simply standing there. We learned back in kindergarten, when we were 5 and 6 years old, to keep our hands to ourselves. So why all of a sudden is there a debate going on whether or not we should punch people who we disagree with? There's a sort of weird cultural shift going on where, because we spend so much time online and we read and research and basically reduce people to just words on a page sometimes, that we feel that just because they differ in opinions that we can treat them however we want, even if that means coming from our most basic and angry, rude, vile places that reside in all of us. We can tune into that because it doesn't matter. They're just an anonymous internet person. While I personally still have trouble trying to interact with people who I've disagreed with in the past, what I'm trying to do going forward is realize that at the moment I'm speaking to someone in the present, their past doesn't necessarily matter in that moment. While it can shape how you act towards them, you kind of have to listen to their current actions as well. If they're treating you decently, then why wouldn't you treat them decently back? If they're being kind of passive-aggressive and off-putting to you, then why feel a need to answer it back with even more snark when you just invoke a sort of snark cycle that nothing gets done? I was listening to a live stream one time from conservative YouTuber Kiki Green. You can check her out here on YouTube or go to madconservative.com. She was telling a personal story about some people in her life that is it's difficult for her to talk to them, but She made the point to say that every time she does talk to them, she has to sort of reintroduce herself to them as they reintroduce themselves to her. And that really stuck with me because nobody knows you 24/7 except for you. So even if you feel like you do know somebody, the moment that you come back in contact with them, they're going to essentially see a new-ish person. Maybe you have something great going on in your life and you're just a ray of sunshine. Maybe something really terrible is happening and you're just a ball of anger. Every time you reconnect with people, you're reintroducing yourself to them. When I was working at Fox and Friends, I was hating life. And it's not the show's fault. I've told you I will never ever shit talk the show. It's not the show's fault. It was my fault because I was hating life because it was 1 a.m. and I didn't want to be there. And I don't want to do this. I don't want to write. I don't want to cut video. I don't want to make banners. I was constantly in a bad mood, and why would you ever want to be nice to someone who comes in and constantly brings a cloud of negativity everywhere they go? You're showing your hand to coworkers. You're showing your hand to people you have to get along with and making everybody dislike you. And damn it, that's exactly what I did, unfortunately. The decent thing that I should have done as an employee there, someone a full-time employee there, was come into work, get the shit done, do it with a smile on my face, and even if I didn't feel like it that day, just get it done and try to find the best in it. If I kept reintroducing myself to my coworkers as somebody who was a positive influence and wanted to do the best for the show that I was hired to work for, then maybe I could have had a much better time. I can say that now. It's been nearly 2 years since I've worked there, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. 2018, in my opinion, is the year of accountability. People are not getting away with things that they once got away with. As I've mentioned before in podcast number 1, the Vendetta era, I believe people's nasty natures are coming up to the surface this year. And maybe that's something that's been festering and bubbling for a very long time. However, we're not tolerating that anymore. We call that out now. We don't let people just be mean and vile and rude for the sake of it anymore. There is plenty of pushback against those who are needlessly cruel and mean simply to get their point across. Take the recent news of YouTuber Total Biscuit. He passed away at age 33. Now, I'll tell you that I didn't watch his content. I knew of him. I didn't know that there was a controversy surrounding him. I didn't know any of this stuff, especially going back to Gamergate, because at this point, who gives a shit about Gamergate? I don't understand. But he was 33, and he passed away from cancer. That horrible disease, cancer. It's an incredibly young age, and it's a devastating loss any way you look at it. Like I said, I wasn't a fan, but I like to believe that I'm a decent enough human to be sympathetic to a loss like that. And yet, there's plenty of instances on Twitter where you see people going on about how happy they are that he's gone, how this is somehow karma for Gamergate, laughing at the man's death. People going back 4 years to a perceived quote-unquote Gamergate slight against them. They took something he said personally, so now they're glad he's dead. That's a disgusting way to look at life. I don't know how you dig in and reach into that acidic pit that resides in you to burp that kind of stuff up. It really says something more about the person who laughs and mocks the dead over feeling personally insulted by someone's words. I don't know how extreme he may have said things, and I don't particularly care. It's an incredibly shitty thing to do, to mock someone who is no longer here to defend himself. Now, of course, There are exceptions to rules like this. Not everybody is deserving of sympathy, because there's extremes anywhere. There's extremes with anything and everything. I admit, when watching documentaries on, say, Ted Bundy or John Wayne Gacy, these were men that did horrible, unthinkable, unspeakable acts to dozens of people. But I cringed, and I cringed hard, when people were waiting outside the prison after their death sentences were carried out, cheering. It still felt weird watching people celebrating death in that way. And the only thing that I can think of to justify my feelings is that you can feel more than one thing at once. It's just up to us to choose which side of our personality is going to win out there. What is it going to take for us to strip away everything, labels, views? What is it going to take for us to strip it away until we're feeling our human level? Do you believe that roast culture is dead yet? Is it funny to be mean and cruel and angry still, or are we receiving more and more pushback about it? I don't want to come on here to this podcast and crossing my arms, stomping my foot and saying, "Come on, guys, we have to get along," in like the whiniest voice possible. Because, of course, we're not always going to be 100% nice and kind to one another. Just like I feel like you can't be 100% cruel to one another. You can't. There's so much gray area in life. We're not black and white as we think we are. But where is the very basic aspect of respecting one another's humanity? Is that still alive? Are we feeling that? Sometimes we attack the person when what we mean to do is attack the view. And I will be the first to admit that, yes, there are a lot of extremes going on here, the things that are not left very ambiguous, you know what I mean? People say things that you're like, you shouldn't be saying that, but who are you to tell somebody you can't say something, Instead, we'll attack the person just because somebody says they want a secure border. They'll get called a racist for that. These are two extremes that are sort of colliding and clashing, and nobody wins out. Because the person that wants to have a conversation does not get one because they are hit with a roadblock of a very extreme word, a very indecent word to call somebody when you don't know that person at all. Sometimes it feels like the people who preach the most about how tolerant they are and how someone should act and how nice everybody has to be to one another, they're the first ones who will turn around and insult and berate someone who doesn't have the quote-unquote correct opinion. And sometimes this browbeating doesn't come in the form of just outright insults. Sometimes they're passive-aggressive attacks, like, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you that you think this way." It's dehumanizing in a way. It's language that equates to patting someone on the head saying, "Oh, don't mind you, you're just an idiot." That's not respectful. We're not really respecting one another for our views. And I've said this even as far back as 2016. We don't respect views, we don't respect thoughts, we don't respect feelings, because we can't stop putting ourselves at the forefront all the time. It's fine to be out for oneself and fine to look out for number one, but just because you feel insulted by someone's view doesn't mean they have to pay for it. And the internet won't let people forget about how wronged they've been, even when everyone else has forgotten about it and moved on. You feeling personally slighted by someone isn't everybody else's problem. Sometimes things just have to hang in the air and be uncomfortable. The decent thing you can do after something like that happens is to just move on yourself. If we hold on to anger and bile, I just wonder what that psychologically does to a person. Because I believe it doesn't only show up on your surface, but it festers away and rots beneath the skin too. If you unleash the nastiest part of yourself to everyone, it's going to signal to them that you're just a rotten person at the core. Of course, we all have horrible thoughts that occur sometimes. I'm not saying I'm exempt from it. I think really terrible things a lot. But they're things that I acknowledge to myself and myself alone. And why do I think this way? Oh, because of this. I even try, if I could try to justify some of the things. The nastiest doesn't have any place in society anymore. When we find what's at our core, and we discover that anger or that bile that does reside there, you have to find the way to wipe it out. Pick and choose when the anger is appropriate. Because there are instances of injustice that needs to be fought back against in our society. But think about it this way. Is a thing that you're angry about, is it a problem, or did you go looking for that problem? And I feel like a lot of the time, people go looking for problems because they'll find them. And they want everybody else on board to help fight against it. The decent thing that you could do for yourself is to figure out what's motivating you. Why you feel like you can't treat someone with different views like a person. What's stopping you? What's hindering you? And what's it going to take for us to find the way to talk to one another? Because having these tough conversations is really the only way that progress is made. And I personally hope you're up to the task. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Things are going pretty well with this podcast. I hope they are anyway. Please make sure to subscribe and give a like to this video and share it if you know someone who should be listening to it, I guess. Going forward, these podcasts will be coming out every Wednesday around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more, you can please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and WordPress at HelloGines, or shoot an email over to gina.annunziato@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Ginescast. This is Gina Annunziato signing off, and I will see you next time. Take care.